Hi everyone and welcome to our video lecture on dihybrid crosses. So dihybrid crosses are the dreaded 16-box Punnett squares, but don't be afraid, they're not too tough to solve. I'm going to take you through how you would figure out how to set up the dihybrid cross, how to solve for a dihybrid cross, and analyze the results. So they're not too bad, and then in the coming days we're going to do some practice problems. So what is a dihybrid cross? A dihybrid cross is a cross that involves two traits. So prior to this, we were doing monohybrid crosses. Mono means one, di means two. A monohybrid cross is the 4-box Punnett squares because you're only dealing in one trait, whereas now we're going to be dealing in two traits. So to figure out how to solve these problems, we're going to go through with an example. And the example we have is going to be with freckles and dimples. So these are our two different traits, whether you have freckles or not, or whether you have dimples or not. This little girl in the picture has both. She has dimples, right, and she has freckles. So we're going to start by reading through our problem. Show the possible genetic combinations among offspring of a man who is heterozygous for both dimples and freckles, and a woman who is recessive for dimples and freckles. So heterozygous, homozygous, dominant, recessive, that's all the same. That does not change in terms of what those words mean. So the first thing you want to do when you're solving one of these problems is figure out the genotypes. That also hasn't changed. So for the man, it says that he is heterozygous for dimples and freckles. So this is the symbol for a biological male, so this is the father on the left-hand side here. Because he is heterozygous for both traits, I would write a capital and a lowercase letter for both traits. Here he is heterozygous for freckles, here he is heterozygous for dimples. And you can see here that there's no space between the letters, just like there wasn't before when we wrote out the two letters to represent one trait. It's all 4 letters combined to represent his genotype, heterozygous for both traits. The woman is recessive for dimples and freckles. So that means the only way that she could be recessive is if she has 2 recessive copies of both alleles. So she's lowercase f and lowercase d for both. So this is the mother's genotype here. All right. So how you figure out the genotypes of the parents, that's all the same. The only difference now is that you're writing out 4 letters instead of 2. And you're keeping it all together with no spaces. All right. So that's step 1. The next thing you have to do is figure out how you're going to set up the dihybrid cross. So when you're setting up your dihybrid cross, you need to figure out the combinations of the alleles that would form the gametes. And what does that mean in simple terms? You have to figure out what you're going to write on the Punnett square for the parents. So there's a trick to doing this. Here are your 2 parents. And what's here are the possible gamete combinations, or the different versions of these alleles that these parents could potentially put out. So the father has the potential to pass on both dominant alleles for freckles and dimples. He could also pass on the dominant recessive, or recessive dominant, or recessive recessive. He has all these different combinations of those alleles that he would be able to pass on to his children. Whereas the mother, she only has recessive alleles. So her only possibility for passing on to the children is recessive versions of those traits, freckles and dimples. So how did I figure this out? You actually use a method that you use in math class, the FOIL method. I'm sure you've heard of it, right? First, outer, inner, last. It's the same here, except instead of applying it to numbers, we're going to apply it to genotypes. So to figure out the FOIL method for the father, I have the father listed out here for the 2 traits, freckles and dimples. The F stands for first, so you use the first letter of each trait, capital F, capital D. That's his first possible gamete combination. Outer, or outside, that would be the ones that are on the outer part of his genotype, so the capital F and the lowercase d. Inner, for inside, for the I, so now you're using the 2 alleles that are on the inside of his genotype, the lowercase F and the capital D. And then the last are the last 2 alleles, or the last of the combinations of those traits in his genotype, so the lowercase f and the lowercase d. So you would always do this for every genotype. Use the FOIL method to figure it out. Now, the reason I don't have the mothers listed out here is because if I'm working smarter, not harder, and I FOILed the mother's genotype, it would be the same every single time, right? Lowercase f, lowercase d, because those are the only possible gamete combinations that she can pass on. So in order to set up my dihybrid cross, here's both parents, here's my 16-box Punnett square. I take the father's gamete combinations from foiling, first, right, outer, inner, and last. This is just from the page before, same as it was, okay? I have them listed on one side, and then I have the mother listed on the top. Again, it doesn't matter. Top, side, you can switch for either parent, it doesn't matter. But here are all their possible gamete combinations for each one of the traits, the freckles and the dimples. So after foiling, I just put them on the side of the Punnett square, or dihybrid cross. And then I fill in my dihybrid cross. Now often, the biggest mistake I see when students are filling in dihybrid crosses is they forget to keep the letters together. You still keep your F's together, your D's together, whatever it is. So you have your capital F, lowercase f, and then your capital D, lowercase d. That's how you would fill in for the first possible offspring. Go through and do the same for all the others. All right, if you're getting the idea here, I'm going to speed this up a little. Okay, so then you're asked a question. Which percentage of offspring can be predicted to have freckles and dimples, or capital F, capital D here? Okay, so now if I go through and look at each one of my offspring, all of these potential offspring in the first row, they all have the potential to have freckles and have dimples. So I would say that these four, yes, phenotypically, they could have both. 4 out of 16, or 25%. So for this, the rest of them, they would not have that possible combination. If you look at them, this person has freckles, but they don't have dimples, all in that row. These people don't have freckles, but they have dimples, and these people in this row don't have any possible combination of those. So only the first row, 4 out of 16, or 25%. What percentage of offspring could be predicted to have freckles but no dimples? So if you're looking at the dihybrid cross, which row do you think that is? Right, the second row. So all the individuals in this row have that possibility for having that particular phenotype. So again, 4 out of 16, or 25%. And then what percentage of offspring could be predicted to have dimples but no freckles? So in this case, if you're looking at the dihybrid cross, which offspring would that be? If you said the third row, you're right. 4 out of 16 again, or 25%. And then which of the following, which percentage of the offspring could be predicted to have no freckles or nor dimples? So again, same thing here, except now it's the last row. None of these offspring would have both of those traits combined. So again, 4 out of 16. All right, so not too bad. So when you're solving these problems, there are patterns, and there's a key pattern when you're solving dihybrid crosses. Remember that we saw some patterns before when we were doing monohybrid crosses. Whenever you would cross through 2 heterozygous individuals in a 4-box Punnett square, you'd get a ratio of 3 to 1, dominant recessive for the phenotype. You would then get this possible ratio for their genotypes, 1 to 2 to 1. I'm sure you noticed that as you did some practice problems, that it seemed to be the same ratios each time. And that's because there are certain ratios when you cross different genotypes. And it's the same way with dihybrid crosses. So there is a specific ratio or pattern when you do dihybrid crosses, and you want to remember it because it'll save you some time when you're doing these problems. A similar pattern can be found when creating a dihybrid cross among 2 individuals who are, and this is bolded for a reason, heterozygous for both traits. This is important. So in this particular case here, if you're looking at the cats, you had a cat that was homozygous for both traits, homozygous dominant, homozygous recessive, same thing for the other parent. When they crossed and had offspring from a dihybrid cross, all of their offspring would have been heterozygous for both traits. So if you took 2 cats from that generation and crossed them, I know inbreeding, but we'll ignore that for the time being, and cross them, you would have this combination of gametes, if you did first, outer, inner, last, right? Capital S, capital B, lowercase s, capital S, lowercase b, lowercase s, capital B, lowercase s, lowercase b, all right? And that would be the same for both parents, since they are both heterozygous for both traits. Anytime you cross individuals that are heterozygous for both traits, you get this ratio of 9:3:1. And that ratio is for the phenotype of the offspring. So in this case with the cats, short tails are dominant, brown fur is dominant. If you look at this dihybrid cross, after crossing these 2 heterozygous parents, 9 of the offspring have the dominant tail length and the dominant fur color, short tail, brown fur. 3 of the offspring have the short tail and the white fur. 3 of the offspring have the long tail and the brown fur, and one of the offspring is homozygous recessive for both traits. So this 9:3:1 ratio, you should always get this when you do a heterozygous cross or a heterozygous for both parents, for both traits. You'll get this 9:3:1 ratio, and again, that comes from the phenotypes of the offspring, not the genotypes, because that's different. If you went through and looked at each individual genotype, that would be a different ratio. So this 9:3:1 pertains to the way that the organisms look, and you can see the color. Hopefully you don't have that red-green color blindness, right, that we talked about the other day, but you can see the colors match each one. All right, so let's try one with guinea pigs. In guinea pigs, short hair is dominant over long hair, and black fur is dominant to white fur. So you can see in the picture here, we have a long-haired black guinea pig with a short-haired white guinea pig being crossed, and the result of that was all offspring that would have been short hair and dark fur or the black color fur. So if you took one of these individuals and crossed them, what would that look like in terms of their offspring? So we're going to cross two heterozygous individuals, or two individual guinea pigs that look like this one. So the parents would be heterozygous for both traits, capital S, lowercase s, capital B, lowercase b. That's going to be the same for both parents. And then if I use my FOIL method, I would go through and figure out that the first is capital S, capital B. My outside or outer is capital S, lowercase b. My inner or inside, lowercase s, capital B. And then last is lowercase s, lowercase b. So I foiled one of the parents, the first parent here, and these are my gamete combinations. This is what I write on the dihybrid cross. I don't have to do that process again because the second parent is the same genotype. So if I'm working smarter, not harder, I would just fill in my other side of the Punnett square or the dihybrid cross. And then if I go through, this is a sample problem just like the one before. It says that both parents are heterozygous for both traits. So this is a true dihybrid cross, and you would get 9:3:1 as your ratio for the offspring. So if I filled in my dihybrid cross, I would go through and get capital S, right? Capital S, capital B, and all of your offspring would end up with that 9:3:1 ratio. You would have 9 of the offspring that phenotypically would show the short hair and the dark fur, 3 with the black fur and the long hair, 3 with the short hair and the white fur, and then 1 with the long fur and the long and white fur. So if I went ahead and filled this all in, those are the phenotype ratios that I would get. So I'm going to post a sample set with an answer key attached this time. And it'll just be 4 different problems for you to look at and try, and you'll have the answer key to kind of help you as you go along. And then later on, I'll post one that you won't have an answer key right away and you'll have to work through. These aren't too tough. Remember to FOIL. Let me know if you're having any trouble, and I'd be happy to help you.